What if the moment humanity finally stepped into a peaceful galactic future was the exact moment mutants were declared its greatest threat? Space is supposed to be quiet, but the first thing the Enterprise hears is a scream, not through speakers, not through sensors, but directly inside the minds of everyone on the bridge. Picard stiffens, Data's eyes flicker, Worf's hand tightens on his console, and Counselor Troi gasps as if the vacuum itself has reached into her chest and squeezed. The scream doesn't ask for help, it warns. Somewhere beyond Federation space, something powerful has torn through reality, and whatever crossed over did not arrive alone. On a distant, unfamiliar Earth, Professor Charles Xavier wakes from a nightmare he cannot remember, his fingers digging into polished metal instead of wood, his breath fogging a transparent surface that hums with alien energy. Around him, the world feels wrong, too ordered, too quiet, like a mind that has trained itself to hide its fears behind discipline and protocol. He reaches out telepathically for his students, expecting chaos, fear, confusion. What he finds instead makes his blood run cold. His X-Men are here, but they are scattered across the stars. Logan comes to on a steel table under lights that burn brighter than any operating room he's ever seen, restraints humming as they adapt to every flex of his muscles. Smells like a tin can and bad decisions. He growls, claws itching beneath his skin. Somewhere nearby, voices argue in calm, measured tones about unknown genetic divergence and non-Bacellian human evolution. Logan doesn't know where he is, but he knows one thing: people talking like that never end up being the good guys. Across a city of clean lines and impossible calm, Storm stands at the edge of a platform overlooking San Francisco by X. It isn't the San Francisco she knows. Towers rise with elegant restraint. No slums, no smoke, no hunger in the air. She closes her eyes and reaches for the sky, and feels it resists her. The atmosphere is regulated, disciplined, like a caged animal. A world that controls the weather, she whispers, and calls itself free. When Starfleet finally makes contact, it isn't with weapons raised, but with curiosity sharpened to a blade. Picard listens as reports pour in: multiple humanoids, human DNA but radically altered, abilities that defy known physics without technological assistance, no implants, no devices. The word no one wants to say hangs unspoken in the air. Mutants, not enhanced by machines, not uplifted by science, born this way. And then Magneto announces himself. The signal overrides Federation channels effortlessly, his image forming above the Enterprise bridge, eyes burning with a fury shaped by centuries of hatred, wearing new clothes. "You call this utopia," he says softly, almost sadly. A galaxy where humanity finally escaped its own violence. And yet, the moment you encountered us, you reached for your scanners instead of your hearts. Picard tries diplomacy, tries reason, but Magneto's smile is sharp. "I have seen this future before, Captain. It always ends the same way. Starfleet security wants containment. The Science Council wants study. Section 31, watching from the shadows, wants something far worse." And Xavier, sensing the tightening net around his people, realizes with dawning horror that this future, this enlightened Federation, is more dangerous to mutants than any sentinel he has ever faced. Because this time, fear wears the mask of reason, and oppression calls itself protection. As Starfleet dispatches vessels to secure mutant contacts across multiple systems, Xavier and Picard finally meet face to face, two men who believe in peaceful coexistence, staring at the same question from opposite sides. Can a society built on order accept evolution it cannot control? Or will the X-Men become the spark that proves even the stars are not far enough to escape prejudice? And as Magneto begins to gather followers among worlds that fear the Federation's quiet authority, one truth becomes unavoidable. This was never just a crossover of universes. It is the beginning of a war over what the future of humanity is allowed to be. What if the Federation's greatest fear wasn't mutant power, but the idea that evolution no longer needed permission? Picard stands in the observation lounge as stars slide past the viewport, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression calm enough to convince everyone except himself. On the table before him, holographic projections rotate slowly. Logan tearing free of adaptive restraints. Storm hovering above a city as regulated winds spiral out of control. Jean Grey collapsing to her knees as a Starfleet medical officer stares at her brain scans in disbelief. Each image ends the same way, Starfleet stepping back, not in awe, but in calculation. These abilities violate multiple known physical constraints. Admiral Nechayev says through the her voice clipped. Professional. We need to understand them before they destabilize interstellar balance. Picard exhales slowly. Understanding begins with trust. Admiral, not containment. Elsewhere aboard the Enterprise, that trust is already fracturing. Logan sits in a sterile holding chamber, his knuckles resting casually on a table made of transparent alloy. The guards outside don't point weapons at him. They don't need to. The room hums softly, a low vibration that crawls under his skin and makes his healing factor itch. You boys ever stop smiling? He mutters. Or is that part of the uniform? Data watches him with open fascination. Your regenerative capabilities are remarkable. You are, statistically speaking, extremely difficult to incapacitate. Logan snorts. Yeah, been hearing that my whole life. Troy steps forward gently, her empathic senses buzzing like exposed nerves. Logan feels it immediately, a presence brushing his mind. Careful, respectful. He stiffens, eyes narrowing. Careful, sweetheart. I'm not here to invade, Troy says softly. Only to understand how you're feeling. Logan's laugh is humorless. Lady, if you can figure that out, you're better than the last 100 people who tried. On another deck, Jean Grey sits alone, hands trembling as thoughts she doesn't recognize scrape against the edges of her consciousness. This universe feels louder, minds disciplined into neat rows, thoughts trained to march instead of wander, and beneath it all, something else, sentient, vast, watching. She presses her palms to her temples as whispers echo just beyond hearing. The Phoenix isn't here, she murmurs, but something is. Storm's confrontation comes sooner than anyone expects. When Starfleet attempts to relocate her for her own safety, she rises into the air on instinct. The controlled atmosphere of the city, screaming in protest as pressure systems destabilize. Civilians scatter, sirens wail. You do not cage the sky, she declares, eyes glowing white as lightning coils around her like a living crown. For a moment, Starfleet hesitates, not because they fear her power, but because they fear the image. A mutant, unrestrained, hovering above their perfect world. That image spreads across subspace. Worlds that have quietly chafed under Federation oversight watch closely. Magneto watches most of all. He stands on the hull of an abandoned station, magnetic fields rippling around him like an invisible storm, as his followers gather. Mutants, who felt Xavier's call but answered his instead. They fear you, he tells them, voice carrying without amplification. Not because you are dangerous, but because you cannot be regulated. And a system that cannot regulate will eventually eradicate. Back on the Enterprise, Xavier senses the divide, widening like a fault line. He meets Picard again, this time in private, the weight of unspoken history pressing between them. Your people believe they're being cautious, Xavier says quietly. So did mine, until caution became policy, and policy became prisons. Picard's jaw tightens. We are not your Earth, Professor. No, Xavier agrees. That's what frightens me, because even as Picard speaks of diplomacy, Section 31 drafts contingency plans. Even as Troy argues for empathy, algorithms predict uprising. And even as Xavier reaches out to Magneto one last time, he feels the answer harden into something unmovable. The Federation wanted first contact. What it may have just initiated is first resistance. What if the first shot in this war wasn't fired with weapons, but with a decision no one could take back? The Enterprise drops out of warp to the soft blue glow of a Federation starbase, its silhouette serene, almost inviting. From a distance, it looks like a promise. Up close, Xavier feels it for what it truly is, a fortress wrapped in courtesy. He sits in his hover chair, hands folded, mind stretched thin as he listens to the thoughts around him, calm, orderly, controlled, and beneath it all, a quiet consensus forming like frost. Mutants are a variable. Picard has agreed reluctantly to allow a Federation symposium, a gathering of scientists, diplomats, and ethicists to open dialogue with the On paper, it is everything Xavier believes in. In practice, it feels like a tribunal wearing a smile. Jean walks beside him, her face pale, eyes distant. They're not asking questions, she whispers inside his mind. They're categorizing us. Logan, brought along under protest, scans the corridors with narrowed eyes. Smells like a trap, he mutters aloud. To clean, the symposium hall fills with representatives from across the Federation. Their species varied, but their posture the same, hands folded, backs straight, curiosity sharpened by caution. Holographic displays light up, projecting mutant DNA structures, power readings, probability curves predicting potential disruption. Each chart feels like a verdict delivered in numbers. A Vulcan scientist rises. Mutant abilities appear to operate outside known technological mediation. This introduces unacceptable unpredictability. Xavier leans forward. So did warp travel, he replies calmly. So did telepathy. So did your own evolution beyond emotional impulse. Murmurs ripple through the hall, but the debate shifts, tightening. Security protocols, monitoring, voluntary registration. Words that sound reasonable until history presses its weight against them, and then it happens. Somewhere deep within the starbase, alarms erupt. Jean gasps, clutching her head as a psychic scream tears through her mind raw. Panicked, our child, she cries. They're hurting a child. Xavier's eyes snap open, his calm shattering. He reaches out and finds Himmer, mutant boy, barely 12. Telekinetic abilities spiking wildly under fear. Restrained in a lab he never agreed to enter. A precautionary study, justified under emergency powers. Logan is on his feet before anyone can stop him. That's it, he snarls, claws sliding free with a metallic scream that echoes through the hall. Starfleet officers freeze, weapons raised but fingers hesitating on triggers. Picard steps forward. Stand down, he orders, to everyone, and no one at once. But Magneto chooses that moment to act. Across the station, metal screams as walls twist and bulkheads peel open like paper. Gravity fails in sections, bodies slamming helplessly as magnetic fields surge. Magneto's voice booms through the station, amplified by force of will alone. You see, he declares. Dialogue ends the moment. Fear takes control. Storm rises into the chaos, fighting to stabilize pressure systems as the station groans. Jean's power flares dangerously as the child's terror floods her mind. Xavier reaches deeper than he ever has, weaving through thousands of thoughts, trying to hold the station together with nothing but empathy. Picard watches his command unravel, his faith in procedure cracking under the reality before him. He gives the order he never wanted to give. Evacuate non-essential personnel. All hands protect civilians first. In the confusion, Section 31 activates its contingency. Hidden emitters hum to life, flooding corridors with a dampening field designed to suppress mutant abilities. Jean screams as her mind suddenly feels small, trapped. Storm drops from the air, gasping. Logan staggers, muscles locking as his healing factor fights an invisible cage. Xavier feels it too, the sudden, suffocating silence where mutant minds once burned bright. And in that moment, he understands. The Federation didn't plan this symposium to learn. They planned it to test. As the station stabilizes under emergency protocols, Magneto withdraws, his point made in twisted steel and shaken faith. The child is gone, taken by forces unknown, and the word spreads through the stars faster than any subspace signal ever could. The Federation has deployed its first anti-mutant weapon, and now, there is no going back. What if the line between protector and oppressor shattered the instant the Federation proved it could silence evolution itself? The aftermath hangs over the quadrant like radiation unseen, persistent, impossible to ignore. Official reports describe the Starbase incident as a containment breach. Civilians are told the situation is under control. But beneath the sanitized language, fear spreads faster than warp speed. Not fear of Magneto's rage, or Logan's claws, or storms, but fear of what happens when a government learns it can turn off a part of who someone is. Xavier feels the silence where mutant minds once sang. Some abilities have returned, but unevenly, unpredictably. The dampening technology didn't just suppress power, it altered it. Mutants across nearby systems report headaches, disorientation, abilities manifesting wrong. Evolution, once fluid, now stutters. Jean sits alone in her quarters, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. They touched the locks, she whispers to Xavier, her voice shaking inside his mind. Whatever keeps the Phoenix in balance. They rattled it. He feels it to her, pressure building somewhere vast and patient, like a star slowly heating toward collapse. Picard faces a reckoning of his own. In a closed Federation Council session, admirals argue over probability matrices and security forecasts. We prevented a catastrophic loss of life. One insists this technology works. At what cost? Picard snaps, breaking his own discipline. You cannot build peace by threatening identity. Nechiev's gaze is steady, unyielding. Peace requires control. Captain Vuetit, We risk an interstellar arms race of biology. The vote passes. Authorization for expanded deployment of mutant dampening fields is approved under emergency statutes. Picard leaves the chamber feeling older than he ever has, his faith in the Federation bruised but not yet broken. Magneto wastes no time. He addresses the galaxy from the ruins of an orbital platform he has claimed as sanctuary, his image carried on stolen relays and hijacked frequencies. "They have shown you who they are," he says, voice resonant with cold certainty. "A civilization that fears what it cannot regulate will eventually destroy it. Stand with me, and I will ensure mutants are never silenced again. Worlds, listen, some in fear, some in hope, some in quiet agreement." Storm confronts Xavier, her composure cracked by fury. "You told us this future was better," she says, eyes storm-dark. "You told us the stars would be different." Xavier meets her gaze, heavy with regret. "I believed it. Perhaps too much." Logan's decision is simpler. When intelligence surfaces of a hidden Federation Black Site 1, where mutants are being held for study and protection, he doesn't ask permission. He slips away in the night, guided by half-whispered rumors and his own unbreakable sense of right and wrong. "Someone's gotta get their hands dirty," he mutters, vanishing into the void. The rescue is brutal and fast. Logan tears through adaptive security, freeing prisoners who look at him like a myth come to life. But as they escape, a final reveal waits in the shadows of Prototype Sentinel. Not mechanical, but bioengineered, its mind a cold fusion of Starfleet logic and Section 31 paranoia. Logan barely escapes, carrying proof the Federation denies exists. Back on the Enterprise, Picard receives the footage. He watches mutants restrained, studied, categorized. He watches the Sentinel activate. And for the first time, the question is no longer philosophical. It is personal. Xavier senses Magneto moving pieces into place, feels genes growing instability. Storm's wavering faith, Logan's rage sharpening into something dangerous. The X-Men are fracturing, pulled between hope and survival. And somewhere deep in subspace, the Phoenix Force stirs, drawn not by power, but by injustice on a galactic scale. The Federation wanted order. What it may have awakened is fire. What if the force destined to judge worlds was no longer sleeping? And this time, the galaxy itself was the trigger. Jean wakes, screaming before the scream ever leaves her mouth. The Enterprise shudders, as if struck by an invisible wave, lights dimming for half a second before emergency systems compensate. Crew members stagger, clutching their heads, not in pain but in vertigos, though reality itself briefly lost focus. In her quarters, Jean curls inward, every thought burning white-hot. She can feel it now, unmistakably. The Phoenix is not coming. It is already here. Not fully awake, not yet unleashed but aware. Xavier reaches her mind instantly, wrapping it in every ounce of discipline and compassion he possesses. "Jean," he says gently, desperately, "you are not alone. Listen to me. I hear everything." She sobs. "Every world, every fear. They're building weapons meant to erase us, Charles, and the universe is noticing." Across the quadrant, stars flicker. Astrophysicists scramble as unexplained energy fluctuations ripple through subspace, patterns too elegant to be random, too vast to be artificial. Ancient species whisper names long absent from modern records. Some forces are not meant to be summoned. They arrive when imbalance reaches a breaking point. Magneto interprets the signs differently. He stands before a growing army of mutant followers, his confidence unshaken, his purpose sharpened by every new Federation decree. "They escalate," he declares, "because they believe they must. Let us show them escalation on our terms." He unveils his plan, not annihilation, but demonstration. A controlled collapse of a major Federation shipyard, stripped of life but rich in symbolism, proof that mutants cannot be contained. Storm hears of it through whispers, carried on solar winds she no longer fully trusts. She confronts Magneto across a fractured station bathed in starlight. "This won't protect us," she warns. "It will justify everything they fear." Magneto's gaze softens, just for a moment. Fear does not require justification, only opportunity. Meanwhile, Picard reaches his breaking point. When orders arrive to escort a convoy of dampening satellites devices, designed to blanket entire systems in suppression fields, he hesitates. The bridge waits. History waits. He gives the order to stand down, citing unresolved ethical violations. Within minutes, command authority is revoked. The Enterprise is recalled. Picard is relieved of duty pending inquiry. For the first time, The Federation silences one of its own. Logan returns, bloodied but alive, slamming evidence onto Xavier's console. "They're not stopping," he growls. "They're building faster than we can argue." Xavier looks at his team fractured, exhausted, afraid, and makes a choice that terrifies him more than any Sentinel ever could. He reaches out, not just to mutants, but to allies within Starfleet, to Picard, to those who still believe ideals matter more than control. And Jean feels that choice echo through her like a bell. The Phoenix stirs, wings brushing the edges of existence, responding not to rage but to imbalance. Entire civilizations feel it in their bones, a sense that something ancient is measuring them. As Magneto prepares to strike, as the Federation accelerates its defenses, and as Jean struggles to remain herself, one truth becomes unavoidable. This is no longer a conflict about mutants. It is a trial of whether the galaxy deserves the future it claims to protect. And when the Phoenix finally opens its eyes, it will not ask who started the war. What if the moment meant to prove mutant strength became the spark that nearly erased everything they were fighting for? The shipyard hangs above the blue curve of an inhabited world, its lattice of docks and construction rings glowing with peaceful industry. To the Federation, it is infrastructure. To Magneto, it is a symbol of control, of power centralized and unquestioned. He floats at the center of his gathered force, metal humming softly around him, his mind focused, precise. No lives, he reminds them. We make them see without becoming what they expect. But the galaxy rarely respects intentions. As Magneto twists the magnetic fields anchoring the shipyard, alarms scream across half a sector. Starfleet vessels scramble, not to attack, but to shield evacuation corridors. Picard, stripped of command, yet still listened to by those who trust him, coordinates relief from a borrowed console, his voice steady, even as his heart pounds. "Get the civilians out first. All of them." Storm feels the atmosphere below destabilize as orbital balance shifts. She fights the currents instinctively, her power stretching farther than it ever has, and realizes with a jolt of fear that the Phoenix is amplifying everything Jean touches, even indirectly. "Jean," she whispers into the psychic link, "you're bleeding into us." Jean barely hears her. She is standing somewhere that isn't a place, wrapped in fire that doesn't burn, watching probabilities unfold like constellations. She sees Magneto's strike succeed and fail. She sees a cascade reaction no one predicted: gravitational stress transferring through subspace, threatening the planet below. Millions of lives balanced on a choice that hasn't yet been made. Xavier feels her slipping. "Jean, come back," he pleads, pouring every memory of home, laughter, quiet afternoons at the school into the link. This isn't judgment. This is fear. For a heartbeat, the Phoenix hesitates. That hesitation saves the world and changes everything. Jean unleashes a focused surge, not of destruction, but of correction. Energy ripples outward, stabilizing gravity, locking the shipyard in a frozen web of force. But the effort tears something open inside her. The Phoenix flares visibly now, a fiery silhouette briefly visible even to those without psychic sensitivity. Across the quadrant, sensors register it. Ancient watchers turn their attention fully toward this era. Magneto stares, awe and horror warring on his face. "What have we awakened?" he whispers. Starfleet does not wait, interpreting the Phoenix manifestation as an existential threat. The Federation authorizes deployment of its final contingency, a networked, dampening lattice designed to suppress mutant abilities across an entire region of space. It is untested, rushed, desperate. The lattice activates. Mutants everywhere scream. Storm crashes to her knees, the sky vanishing from her grasp. Logan howls as his healing factor stutters, wounds refusing to close. Xavier feels his mind dim, telepathy flickering like a dying star. And Zhongzhang feels the Phoenix recoil, wounded and enraged, its balance shattered. Picard watches the readouts in horror. "You're not containing a threat," he shouts to no one who will listen. "You're provoking a reckoning." The lattice begins to overload, feedback spiraling as the Phoenix pushes back against suppression meant for far lesser forces. Space itself bends, subspace tearing like fabric under strain. For the first time, the Federation realizes it has made a catastrophic miscalculation. Xavier, weakened but resolute, reaches out one last time to Picard, to Magneto, to Jean. "If this continues," he warns, voice barely more than a whisper across minds, "there will be nothing left to save." And as the lattice collapses inward, energy building toward an inevitable release, One question echoes through every corner of the galaxy. When judgment comes, who will stand accountable, the ones born different, or the ones who tried to erase them? What if the only way to save the future was to trust the very power everyone was trying to destroy? The lattice doesn't explode. Space folds inward with a sound no one hears but everyone feels. Pressure behind the eyes, a tightening in the chest, as if the universe itself is drawing a sharp breath. Entire star systems flicker on tactical displays, then stabilize, then flicker again. The Phoenix Force coils around the collapsing suppression field, not attacking it, not fleeing it, but holding it in a delicate, impossible balance. Jean floats at the center of it all, suspended between existence and something far older. Her eyes burn like newborn stars, tears evaporating before they can fall. "I can stop it," she whispers, her voice layered with something vast, but not without becoming it. Xavier's mind reaches for her, weaker than ever, but still unmistakably hers. "Jean," he says softly, "power doesn't decide who you are. Choice does." Magneto hears those words and, for the first time since arriving in this universe, he hesitates. Around him, his followers falter as their powers stutter unpredictably, the cost of the Federation's desperation written in pain across their faces. He looks at them and sees not soldiers, but children he once swore to protect. The shipyard drifts behind him, frozen in Jean's grip, no longer a symbol of victory, only of how close he came to proving his enemies right. Picard stands aboard a medical transport, his uniform stripped of insignia but not of authority. Officers and civilians alike listen as he speaks, his voice carrying through open channels. "This crisis was not born of mutant power," he says. "It was born of fear, and fear does not make us safe, it makes us small." Against orders, dozens of Starfleet captains follow his lead, shutting down auxiliary dampening relays, pulling back fleets meant to contain rather than protect. It isn't enough to end the crisis, but it slows it. Xavier feels the shift and seizes the moment. He opens what remains of his telepathic reach, not to command, not to plead, but to share. Across the region, mutants and non-mutants alike feel fragments of each other's truths, memories of persecution, of duty, of trying to do the right thing and failing. For a fleeting, dangerous instant, the galaxy understands itself. Jean screams as the Phoenix surges, reacting to the sudden flood of empathy like fuel poured on flame. Space cracks. Time distorts, ancient entities stir, watching to see whether this species will learn or be erased. And then Magneto moves. He turns his power inward, anchoring the collapsing lattice with raw magnetic force, burning through his own strength to buy Jean seconds, precious finite seconds. "Do it," he growls through gritted teeth. "End this. Prove them wrong." Jean looks at him, truly looks, and sees not a tyrant or a savior, but a man shaped by fear, just like the Federation, just like herself. She makes her choice. The Phoenix does not judge the galaxy. It heals it. Energy erupts outward in a controlled wave, not destruction but reconfiguration. The lattice dissolves into harmless light. Suppression fields vanish. Mutant powers return, not amplified, not diminished, but stabilized. Subspace seals itself, scars fading like old wounds. Jean collapses, unconscious, human once more. Silence follows. In that silence, the Federation's authority lies in ruins, Magneto's certainty shattered, and Xavier's dream reborn in a form none of them expected. The galaxy still stands, but it is watching now, waiting to see what comes next. Because peace bought at the edge of annihilation is fragile, and the final question remains unanswered. After everything that's happened, can coexistence survive the truth? What if the future everyone fought over could only exist once? No one was allowed to own it. The galaxy doesn't celebrate its survival. It pauses. Starfleet vessels drift in quiet formation, weapons powered down not by order, but by shame. Federation channels fill with hearings, resignations, fractured apologies that sound small compared to how close everything came to ending. The word mutant is no longer spoken as a threat, but it isn't yet spoken as trust either. Not after what the stars themselves witnessed. Jean awakens in a medical ward aboard a neutral vessel, sunlight filtered through transparent alloy, soft and human. Her powers are there, present, restrained, balanced, but the Phoenix is silent now, distant, like a watcher satisfied enough to sleep. Xavier is beside her, exhausted beyond words, tears unashamed. "You chose them," he whispers. "All of them." Jean closes her eyes. "I chose myself." Magneto stands alone on the edge of space, his armor discarded, his power diminished but intact. For the first time in his long life, he does not know what comes next. His followers wait for direction he cannot yet give. When Xavier reaches out, Magneto does not turn away. There is no forgiveness spoken, no absolution granted, but there is something rarer: understanding. Picard faces the Federation Council one final time. He speaks not as a captain, not even as an officer, but as a witness. "You sought to control evolution because you believed it threatened order," he says calmly. "But order without conscience is merely fear with better technology. If the Federation cannot live by its principles when they are tested, then it does not deserve them." The reforms are slow, painfully slow. Section 31 is exposed, dismantled piece by piece. Dampening technology is outlawed under interstellar accords. Mutants are granted autonomous citizenship, not assimilation, but something unprecedented: recognition as a distinct evolutionary path, protected by law rather than managed by force. Storm helps terraform worlds alongside Starfleet scientists. The sky no longer something to dominate, but something to collaborate with. Logan leaves, as he always does, disappearing into the vastness with a quiet promise that if the future goes wrong again, he'll be there. Others choose different paths, some staying within Federation space, some building communities beyond it, some following Magneto into self-imposed exile among the stars. Xavier establishes something new: not a school, not a state, a bridge between species, between fears, between futures that no longer have to compete. It is imperfect, fragile, but it exists. And somewhere far beyond known space, ancient intelligences withdraw their gaze. The test has been passed not because the galaxy was good, but because it learned the stars do not belong to the Federation. They do not belong to mutants. They belong to everyone willing to face what they fear without trying to erase it. Because the greatest frontier was never space, it was coexistence.